This video is for parents and students hoping to navigate the FAFSA and the financial aid process of applying to college. Again, we are not financial aid experts, so we really encourage students and parents to reach out to the college's financial aid office with specific questions. There are a few updates for the 2021 FAFSA. Mostly they revolve around the 1040 tax forms being a little bit different. And then students are able to use the IRS DRT, which is the data retrieval tool. So students and parents can directly input information from the IRS right into the FAFSA, which is what colleges really do recommend. So if you have that option and choosing to do so, pulling your tax information out of the IRS from the 2018 year, that's something they really do suggest. There also is a new Schedule 1 back from the 2018 tax return. And so if parents have deductions, they most likely completed a Schedule 1. So take a look at your tax return to be able to answer that. But again, it should pull right from the IRS data retrieval form. They no longer are asking about the number of exemptions because I think households are looking a little different. And so they have some other questions in the FAFSA that kind of relate to those questions now. Please know that you should never be paying for the FAFSA. It is the free application for federal student aid. And so you should have an fsa.ed.gov website. So it's a .gov. So if anybody is ever asking for money, you are not on the right site. For any student and parent to sign the FAFSA, they have to have an FSA ID. So this website here will allow students and parents to register for an FSA ID. I will say that it takes 2 to 3 days, sometimes quicker, for students and parents to get those FSA IDs. One parent has to have an FSA ID, and then each student needs to have one. So if you have multiple students, each one of them will need an FSA ID, but only one parent will need one to sign the FAFSA. Email addresses and phone numbers are required. You really need to have your cell phone in front of you because it kind of texts you some information right away to kind of verify who you are. Please know that it cannot have the same email address or phone number as the student. And we've already recommended that students do not use their school email addresses because those do change. I will say my biggest suggestion here is to be sure that you write this information down, keep it in a safe place, because every year about this time, you're going to need to complete the FAFSA, and that information isn't always something that's remembered. And so being able to refer back to it is always very helpful. You can complete the FAFSA on a regular laptop or computer. They have a My Student Aid app. Paper is almost impossible. They really don't wish to send that to anyone anymore. And then, but I'm sure they do if you request it. And then there's also just on your mobile website or on your phone on just the regular website as well. The app, only 11 students used it last year, and I would say it's probably because it wasn't very user friendly, but they have done some updates, and so some students really do like it, but again, it's kind of smaller. So if you have an iPad, it may be a little bit easier, but it does, it's very small on a cell phone. When you log into the FAFSA, you're going to be able to answer questions either as the student or as the parent. So just be sure you're clicking on which one that is, and then including your FSA ID and the password that you've already created. Know that when you're filling this out for a current senior, it will be the 2021 FAFSA. So just make sure you're clicking on the correct one. Dependency is a big question. So most of our students are dependent upon their parents and their parents' financial information. And so you will most likely have students that need to give parental information. But there are other ways and different ways that students may be considered independent as well. Dependency can be maybe this individual is 19, unmarried, has a baby, but lives with their parents. So because their parents are paying 50% of their support, they're still considered dependent. And so the student here may be living on their own, can maybe be considered dependent or independent, depending on who's providing that support. And so there are some other questions that are asked that I think students really need to pay attention to. So at any time since you turned 13 or both your parents deceased, were you in foster care or you a dependent or ward of the court? And so again, that's legal documentation that will be needed. And then that second to the last one about does someone other than your parent or step parent have legal guardianship of you determined by a court? So again, those papers would need to be provided to the financial aid office to verify that that student is considered independent. But other than that, most students have dependency upon their parents. Some students may fall under the homelessness category, which is the definition is lacking fixed and regular adequate housing, including living in shelters, parks, motels, hotels, public spaces, camping grounds, cars, abandoned buildings, or temporarily living with people because you had nowhere else to go. This is not something that a student can choose to like move out. And so then this would follow. This would be a situation where the entire family is in one of these situations. And so not living in physical custody of your parents is considered an unaccompanied youth, and that's a little different as well. And so sometimes our office has to provide documentation to the financial aid office explaining that family situation, and we can always do that. So most students will click, I will provide information about their parent. A parent is considered the legal, biological, or adoptive parent or step parent. Parents are not married, but maybe live together. Maybe they're married and separated and living apart. Maybe they're in a same-sex marriage and living together, or maybe they're just non-citizens. All of those are still considered parents. And so if you're unable to provide parental information for whatever reason, you can click that. But then there are some situations at that point then that the financial aid office is going to ask for more information. And so sometimes there are reasons that students are not able to provide information because maybe their parents are incarcerated. Maybe they just don't know where they are currently. And so those are those situations where our office can be helpful with that as well. If you are unable to provide parental information, the financial aid office will follow up with you as the student. So we have been telling students that you can submit the FAFSA, but it will not calculate your EFC, and that you have to then reach out to the financial aid offices of the colleges you're interested in so they can get something together. The financial aid office is the only office or authority to be able to actually change parental information on the FAFSA. The FAFSA has to be reported based on 2018 tax information. That's the only way it can be done, and they're the only ones that can change information if it needs to be changed. So there are going to be special circumstances, and so these could be the parent has refused to file the FAFSA or to sign it, and so there's maybe some information needed again for that. Maybe there are other situations that we'll talk about here in a minute, but nonetheless, we've encouraged students to really be on top of their emails because this is the way that the financial aid office communicates with students. And so there's also an option of will file your 2018 tax return. So you can keep going if you haven't, for whatever reason with extensions, filed it, but you will then have to log back in and update that information. Things that are not in the FAFSA, the value of your current primary house, your life insurance, your retirement plans, anything like the cash savings and checkings are already reported in the FAFSA. And then farms and businesses with fewer than 100 folks that are their employees, and then the family farm is not included either. There are other circumstances that would be considered special and that would need some attention and information provided to the financial aid office. And so here are some examples. In 2018, maybe the parent was working and now has lost their job, or they were married in 2018 and now they're divorced, or there's other extenuating medical dental expenses that are quite large. And so that's where that student and parent need to reach out to the financial aid office to file some kind of special circumstance for them to kind of look into that further. The FSA ID right here is used for both the student and the parent to sign the FAFSA. We did tell students to be kind of aware and not send things through email, especially if they include their social security numbers. But a lot of times the colleges will have an uploading process or a website for which to securely upload information, but maybe making sure that students are aware of that. Most of these colleges are going to have students use their school portal that they've already maybe created or have to create once they're accepted to get their financial aid information. A lot of colleges may send something home in the mail, the next one may just email, and the next one may not do any of it, and the student has to log into their portal. So every college is different, so please, be aware of that. There are some different grants and funds that Ohio specifically has, so I would really be asking financial aid offices about that as well. And I will say that some of the biggest suggestions I have for parents is to be sure when you're entering your student's social security number that it's accurate and looking at a social security card. Although we hope as parents to be able to remember those social security numbers, that's the worst mistake because then the FAFSA is just not able to be processed very easily. I will say when you get the financial aid board letter, they're going to be very confusing at times. And so sometimes it will list out every single grant, scholarship, and maybe work study. And so understanding what work study is. And so we told students that clicking work study as an option on the FAFSA is a wonderful idea, and an opportunity for them to have an on-campus job. But again, sometimes those financial aid letters actually take out, say, $3,000. Well, that implies that that student is then working all year and $3,000 of their wages are going to tuition. And so some students like to use that as their own spending money and not part of their financial aid package. So just be aware of that when you're looking at those letters to better understand exactly what is due. Please know that some of these loans, they also have origination fees. And so, yes, you may have $5,500 in loans, but if you have $450 in origination fees, that's not, you're going to be a little bit short. And so really kind of making sure you're communicating with those financial aid offices and asking questions. We really encourage students and parents to reach out to them, ask if there's any more money or any other opportunities, what kinds of loans are best for your student or you as a parent, because there are Parent Plus loans out there. But most of all of the federal loans that students are earning through filling out the FAFSA are in the student's name. Nothing else, no parent is involved. The Parent Plus loan is a parent-specific loan that is in the parent's name and has nothing attached to the student. So there are some different loans out there. So just really do your research and ask the good questions. But again, if you need assistance, have questions, or struggling to fill out the FAFSA, please call the counseling office at the high school, or you're welcome and always encouraged to call the financial aid office at your child's specific college.